In the middle of a glittering corporate gala, laughter erupted, not from joy but from mockery. A janitor wearing his worn uniform had been dared to sit at the grand piano in the corner. Guests smirked, expecting clumsy noise, a cruel reminder of his place in their world. But when his rough hands touched the keys, something shifted. The room grew still. What began as a joke turned into a haunting melody that carried the weight of hidden struggle, unspoken dreams, and raw humanity. By the final note, not even the CEO, once too proud to notice him, could hold back tears. By day, Marcus was invisible. He pushed his mop down the gleaming marble hallways of a corporate empire, unnoticed except when someone barked at him for missing a spot. A single father. His evenings were spent in a cramped apartment cooking simple meals and helping his young daughter with homework under the flicker of a weak light bulb. Music had once been his world, before bills, loss, and survival forced him to trade symphonies for silence. Few knew he had ever touched an instrument. The company's annual gala was a spectacle of wealth and power. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above the crowd as glasses clinked and expensive laughter filled the air. Marcus had been assigned to tidy the edges of the event, making himself small in the corners. But he couldn't help noticing the grand piano gleaming under the spotlight, polished and waiting. It tugged at something deep inside him, a longing buried under years of struggle. When a group of young executives spotted him staring, they saw not a man but an opportunity for ridicule. With smirks and cruel whispers, they urged him toward the piano, loudly enough for others to notice. "Let's see what the janitor can do," one laughed, certain the night would end in more entertainment at his expense. Marcus hesitated, his hands trembling, not from fear of the keys but from the weight of the room's judgment. Unaware to the crowd, his daughter had slipped in quietly, watching from the back. Her eyes shone with silent encouragement, as if she knew something no one else in that room did. Her father was more than the uniform he wore. Marcus sat down at the piano, the weight of 100 mocking eyes pressing against his back. His uniform, a faded shirt stained from hours of scrubbing floors, looked out of place against the polished black of the instrument. To the executives, this was theater, a cruel joke meant to highlight his place in their world. Some even pulled out their phones, eager to capture the janitor's humiliation. The room hummed with whispers. A few voices called out sarcastic encouragement, while others leaned in with smug anticipation. Marcus's calloused fingers hovered above the ivory keys, shaking slightly. Not from inexperience, but from the enormity of the moment. For years those fingers had known the feel of broom handles, mops, and buckets, not Steinways. Yet once, long ago, they had danced effortlessly across keyboards, weaving melodies that filled entire halls. He closed his eyes. A memory surfaced, his late wife standing in their small living room swaying as he played for her. Her laughter, his daughter's tiny hands clapping along. Music had been his refuge, his joy, his way of giving. But when illness claimed his wife and debt claimed their security, he had buried that gift deep beneath survival. Now, with the entire company watching, he wondered if he still had the strength to bring it back. His daughter's face caught his eye from across the room. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't embarrassed. She was hopeful. That was enough. Marcus pressed the first key. A single note rang out, hesitant yet steady. The room chuckled, assuming their predictions were correct. But then another note followed, then another, flowing together like water finding its course. The laughter began to thin, replaced by silence. His hands moved faster, surer, pouring years of buried pain, resilience, and love into the melody. What began as mockery transformed into something unexpected. The song rose and fell like a confession, raw and unfiltered. Each note carried weight, the struggles of a single father, the exhaustion of long nights, the grief of loss, and the flicker of hope that never fully died. It was not just music. It was truth, spoken without words. By now the room was transfixed. The clinking glasses stilled, the whispering voices muted. Even those who had mocked him found their smirks fading, their chests tightening with something unfamiliar. Respect. The melody swelled, and Marcus lost himself entirely, forgetting the suits, the chandeliers, the cruel laughter. He was no longer the janitor. He was the musician he had always been, the man his daughter believed in. At the back of the room, a figure stirred. The CEO, a man rarely moved by anything other than numbers and contracts. His gaze locked on Marcus and something softened in his usually stern expression. The music reached him in a way no polished speech or grand deal ever had. As the final notes lingered in the air, silence swallowed the room. No one dared clap immediately, as though breaking the spell would be a crime. For a heartbeat, Marcus feared the ridicule would return. But instead, something else happened, something no one expected. The last note hung in the air, fragile yet unbreakable, like a truth too heavy to deny. Marcus's chest heaved as he pulled his hands away from the keys. Suddenly aware of the silence pressing down on the room, his heart raced. For a terrifying moment, he thought the spell would shatter and the laughter would return. But it didn't. Instead, the executives sat frozen, their wine glasses untouched, their phones lowered. A few had tears glistening in their eyes, though they tried to mask them behind forced coughs or folded arms. The song hadn't just been beautiful. It had been undeniable, raw in a way that stripped every person in the room of their armor. Then, a sound broke the silence. It wasn't laughter or mockery. It was clapping, slow, deliberate, and resonant. The CEO had risen to his feet, his hands meeting in applause that echoed through the hall. It was the kind of clap that commanded attention, forcing everyone else to follow. Within seconds, the room thundered with applause. Not polite, not obligatory. Real. Marcus looked down, unable to meet their eyes, but then he felt a small hand slip into his own. His daughter, tears streaming down her cheeks, whispered with her eyes what words couldn't capture. Pride. The CEO stepped forward, his towering presence now softened. He didn't speak right away, but when he finally did, his voice carried something no one had ever heard from him before. Emotion. The man known for boardroom battles and ruthless decisions now stood humbled by a janitor's truth expressed through music. What had started as a cruel joke to belittle Marcus had turned into the most unforgettable performance of the night. The executives who once sneered at him now struggled to look him in the eye, ashamed of their laughter. Some wiped their tears discreetly, while others simply bowed their heads. Marcus had given them something they hadn't expected, something their wealth and status couldn't buy. A reminder that dignity, talent, and resilience could live in the most overlooked corners of the world. In that moment, Marcus was no longer invisible. He wasn't just the janitor who cleaned their floors. He was a man who had commanded the entire room without saying a single word. The applause seemed endless, but Marcus didn't bask in it. He bowed his head humbly, gripping his daughter's hand tighter, silently thanking her for being his reason to fight through humiliation in the first place. Without her, he might never have sat at that piano, never shown the world what he carried within. The CEO approached, his face softened with respect that seemed uncharacteristic for a man of his reputation. He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, a simple gesture, yet one that spoke volumes. No contracts, no signatures, no titles, just acknowledgement of one human being's worth by another. The executives who had laughed minutes earlier couldn't meet Marcus's eyes. Their shame was a quiet apology. The same mouths that had sneered at the janitor now whispered his name with reverence. For once, they saw not a man defined by his uniform, but by his undeniable gift. Marcus didn't linger for glory. He returned to his daughter, wrapped her in his arms, and whispered only to her that this moment belonged to her too. The little girl who believed in him when the world saw nothing but a janitor had always known the truth, that her father carried greatness. In the days that followed, whispers of the performance spread beyond the banquet hall. The story of the janitor who played like a master pianist became something more than an anecdote. It became a reminder. A reminder that talent, dignity, and humanity are not determined by job titles or paychecks, but by resilience and heart. The CEO, deeply moved, quietly ensured Marcus's life would change, not with charity but with opportunity. A scholarship for his daughter, a role that recognized his skill beyond mops and buckets. Yet Marcus remained grounded, never forgetting that his music had always been less about recognition and more about survival, about telling the world what words never could. And perhaps the most profound impact was not in Marcus's life, but in the room full of executives who walked away changed. They had entered that night believing themselves untouchable, higher than those who served them. They left humbled, reminded that the human spirit cannot be measured in salaries, status, or social class, because on that night, a janitor taught them something their wealth never had. that greatness is not who sits at the head of the table, but who rises with courage when the world tries to keep them down. So the question lingers. How many stories like Marcus's are still hidden in plain sight, waiting for a chance to be